Right. Good morning, everyone. It is 10 o'clock. Are we live? We are live. So we will start, please. So welcome to today's meeting of Ulster Council's Cabinet. I'm Richard Clare, Leader of the Council, and I chair Cabinet. Will be presiding over the meeting. Before the meeting begins, I can ask each Cabinet member to confirm their attendance for those watching the live stream. We'll start with Laura.
Morning, I'm Councillor Laura Mays. I'm the Cabinet Member for Children's Services, Education and Skills and Deputy Leader.
Councillor Nick Bottrell, I'm Cabinet Member for Development Management, Strategic Planning and Finance.
Morning, I'm Jane Davis. I'm Cabinet Member for and Inclusion.
You weren't on then?
On that side.
Okay,
That's
sorry.
better.
I'm Councillor Jane Davis. I'm the Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care, SEND and Inclusion.
On the side of it. Okay.
Good morning, I'm Bill Orford, I'm Cabinet Member for Housing, Strategic Assets and Asset Transfers.
Good morning, Ian Blair-Pilling, Cabinet Member for Public Health, Leisure, Libraries, Facilities Management and Operational Assets.
Go for it, Nick.
I will go. Hi, I'm Councillor Nick Holder. I'm the Cabinet Member for Environment and Climate Change.
Good morning, Caroline Thomas, Cabinet Member for Transport, Street Scene and Flooding.
Good morning, I'm Ashley O'Neill. I'm Cabinet Member for Governance, IT, Broadband, Digital Licensing, Staffing, Communities and Area Boards.
Thank you. If I can ask all other speakers, including members, to introduce themselves when they are called to speak, particularly the first time they speak, please. So if I now formally open the meeting, encourage all those watching the live stream to access the agenda and agenda supplement, which are available on our website. So apologies. There are none. Minutes of the previous meeting. Does anyone have any comments relating to the minutes? In which case, I will move that they are approved. Do I have a seconder, please? Thanks. All those in favour? Thank you. Declarations of interest? No. We then come on to leaders' announcements. We've got I wanted to make sure we put another update in on the work that is being done around the cost of living, and particularly around the household support fund. Now we've got some of the detail there. I wasn't planning on reading through it in detail. I will ask to make sure that we get this published online as soon as possible. But heating perhaps is not quite the issue it was. Their energy costs are still sky high. They are coming down, but for those who are on fixed deals, that isn't much relief. We've certainly got some issues with certain affordable housing providers, registered providers, which are making headlines, and I am particularly, I think it's fair to say, wound up about where excessive costs are being passed on to residents. We have got the household support fund is probably the big item just to reference. As reported at the Cabinet meeting in March, we've allocated the funding from all of last year's funding to the household support grant. We've received, 5.4 million to allocate this year. And officers have been working really hard to make sure that we've got the appropriate mechanisms in place to do that. It's being dealt with under the supervision of Ian Blair-Pilling. I think we need to be drawing people's attention to that information as it comes out so that people know what support there is and how they're able to access it. The other point that I would add when this piece of work comes out is that you'll see detailed breakdown of the work that the area boards have been doing. Did you want to comment at all, Ian? Please do.
If I may, please. Remind people that one of the big differences this time round, and it's the fourth time round, is that previous times have been 6 months at a time. This is a year, and therefore we've got quite a lot of experience to draw on. And I just want to assure people that a very exhaustive review has been done of our experience of what worked and what didn't work last time round. An enormous engagement with all the different stakeholders, especially the volunteer sector in this. this is not simply changing the dates. The adjustments have been made as to what is being done and how it's being done, with whom in this, from all of that. And the final point is that I've yet to see it, but I have been emphasising with officers how we really need to make this clear in our comms to people as to the what, the who, and the how through all of this, to make sure that people get what it is they need to get their help.
Thank you, Ian. So there will be a detailed clarity coming out very soon. But I just wanted to make sure that we've updated you that is on its way. I won't say anything else on the updates there. If you want to take a look at the detail, please have a look when it's published online. If we then come on to item 5, public participation, questions from councillors. We have, as usual, received a number of questions, and we will run through those now. So we've got questions. I don't know if we've got people with us responses. First up were questions from Margaret Wilmot. I haven't seen Margaret. So the answers of those have been provided. Then there were some questions from Dave Yarsley, who isn't here either. Then Ian Thorne, who also isn't able to be with us. So then Lucy Castleman and Celia Beckett. Did you have supplementaries? Please do come up and ask them. These were questions headed towards Nick Botterill around, primarily around the local plan. Question, sorry. So if you asked your supplementary, please.
I'm Lucy Castleman and I'm from Hague. I would like to ask whether you consider that the additional guidance on constraints should apply to plans, and I'm talking about the local plan here, continuing to be prepared, enabling communities with plans already in the system, the Hilperton neighbourhood plan I'm specifically talking about, to benefit from changes and so reduce the risk of Staverton and Hilperton communities being exposed to speculative development.
Thank you. Nick?
Well, I have been away for a couple of weeks, so things may have come out whilst I've been away. But
sadly, they haven't.
They haven't. So actually, we haven't heard back from the response to the consultation exercise at the moment. But clearly, once we do hear back, we will be taking that into account. So there's obviously some profound proposals which were floated, which will affect all sorts of things, as the responses to your question have said already, the questions that you lodged earlier. So, yes, is the answer if appropriate. But we can't prejudge what we don't know at the moment.
This is really frustrating us. I did raise this with our MPs last Friday. The consultation from a government perspective on their changes to the National Planning Policy Framework closed at the end of March. We were expecting to see responses we were assured there would be responses very quickly in April.
5th of April, they were saying. Really.
Yes. And we haven't, and those responses, as and when they appear, our understanding is they become binding in planning terms in most cases at that point. Certainly things relating to 5-year land supply and the implication of neighbourhood plans as well ought to become binding the moment those consultation responses are cleared by government, because they're tweaks to the way that existing law works rather than changing the law. We've seen nothing. I pushed the MPs hard on that last week. They've gone away to try and find out exactly when this will be coming out. I mean, I think government do have a tricky issue here. They need to make sure that enough houses are being built to meet the demands for the UK as a whole, but they also have councils like us saying, look, we've got a local plan, it's coming up for publication July. If we're able to make changes involving it, we need to know right now, because if you tell us in June, that won't be any good. And we'll then have to work out how to fit that into the process later. So we're acutely aware of the issues here and the need to get some clarity as fast as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Dawn, do you want to come in as well? Please do.
Yes. Really what I'm asking for is more clarification of the answer that I posed. It's to do with timing. And so you may not be able to answer this, but I still think the process, it's really important we understand the process. So when do you envisage that Hilperton and Staverton parishes will benefit from the reduced housing land supply requirement? And given that the local plan for Trowbridge has already been subject to Regulation 18 consultation, will this happen when the government publishes the revised National Planning Policy Framework, which, as you say, is expected in spring 2023, or will this consultation happen as part of Regulation 19 in the autumn? And how, therefore, will the local communities be given more of a say on development, as has been indicated by the government?
Sorry, we'll need, if you could turn your mics off now, we can only have 3 mics on at once.
The answer is a little bit the same as to the last question, in that until we know what government are proposing to do, we can't prejudge that issue. But as the leader has just said, we are expecting, or expecting that the proposals will come out shortly. That will lead us to be able to inform our draft plan, and the draft plan is due on July the 3rd. So that is the time when you would see what the impact of those proposals would be. We're still, I guess if some of the things that are in the government's response are particularly impactful, it could potentially, I'm not expecting it, but it could potentially impact on our timetable for the draft plan. But at the moment, we are fully intending to publish the draft plan at the beginning of July, and in that will be the detail that you are seeking. And I can't be any more clear than that, really. As the leader said, it's incredibly frustrating. We really do need these responses from government now.
And just the only other thing I'd add is all this has to be evidence-based. So even when we get detail from government, we've got to make sure that the evidence stacks up to whatever, to take the new data from government and then feed it through the evidence system. This isn't us making decisions in a room. This is officers following a very clear evidence, flow of evidence to determine site allocations.
Can I just say
Please, go on.
that the work of the Hilperton Area Action Group is also totally evidence-based, and there is a huge level of concern about the possibility of a vast development taking place in Hilperton and Staverton. And I also would be grateful if once the new framework comes out that we could be advised accordingly, and that we're not left waiting until July the 3rd to know whether there are any implications. I appreciate you can't share the details with us, but I think at least we could be involved in the process so we understand what is happening. Thank you very much.
Did you want to add anything further there, Nick, and then we'll move on?
We can't share the details, as you know, because of the procedures that are laid down for us in these sorts of things. But we can certainly share with you the response from government and make sure you get that.
Thank you.
Thank you. If we then move on to the next questions were from Anne Henshaw. Anne? No. And then from Mel Boyle? No. And then from Chris Caswell? Don't think I've seen Chris here either. So I think that brings us to the end of questions. There was something about a late, no, that's fine, I've got it supplementary. Thank you. So we will then move on to the first item on the agenda, which is performance and risk update, agenda item 6. I will introduce this. For aficionados of Cabinet, you will have seen a couple of versions of this report now. We are I think now, and as we've discussed frequently in the past, we are now getting to a stage where I think it's fair to say that we have something close to a working final version. I think there's still some tweaking that is needed, and I wanted just as a general point to say that we're really keen in this to make sure that where we are looking at data, with perhaps a couple of exceptions, all data is being provided on an annual basis, so giving us annual rolling averages. Some of the data we've got are still based on average monthly data over a year. It's essentially the same thing, but it's not quite presented in the format, and some of it's based on quarterly data. And we will be absolutely settled on that for the next iteration of this to make sure we've got that annual data. That way, we have the ability to compare year on year whether performance is improving, is staying the same, is getting worse, and to understand what those drivers are. If we're only looking at quarters, there can be such variance at different times of the year, for example, in recycling, that it renders the data less useful, certainly from my perspective, our perspective, when we're looking at whether performance is improving or not. Also, I think timescales, we seem to have varying timescales. Some are, at the moment, some are annual, some genuinely are monthly, and then we've got some quarterly. And we'll make sure that we've got some clarity about precisely which timescale we're looking at. It is there at the moment, but it's a little hard, perhaps in some cases, to understand. For example, current snapshots written in one case. So we just make sure we've got that absolute clarity. There are a lot of new metrics. We went through a first draft, which was to identify with the exception of inside highways and waste, where it took a little longer to get the data through, where we had some relatively simple levels of data. We've since had an opportunity to discuss as cabinet members with directors what information would be helpful to include at this our sort of top level dashboard. I won't guarantee that things won't come in and out from where we are now, but I think we're at something that is much more significantly settled. And I think gives us that chance to sort of look at what is going on in the world of Wiltshire Council, but also some of the areas that aren't within our direct control, but are directly relevant to us. So the things around school attainment, for example. I wasn't planning on running through the detail of the report. I mean, I think there are things in here that suggest there are areas where policy is definitely working. There are others that might be a little concerning. The drop in children who are physically active, for example. Yeah, we've got the data. In some cases, we need to get more. So antisocial behaviour, one of the ones I'm particularly keen on understanding how we are addressing what can be a really tricky issue. That there we've only just got our starting point now, so we're not going to have good annual data for a couple of years, but that's probably the exception. Did any cabinet member have any comments they wanted to raise about their specific bits of information here? No? In which case, the other, I haven't mentioned, I should, the risk register. I think the risk register personally is now in a much better position. I think the mitigation is in place. I think we've got some elements that we just can't mitigate. That degree of honesty is critical in a risk register, but where we can mitigate, we need to make sure that we understand how we are mitigating. So if I then come over to questions from who's subbing for Ian? Who's Ian today? Who'd like to be in for this item? Go for it. Claire, please.
There we go. Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm not officially subbing for Ian, but I just wanted to say a couple of things on this. I think we would definitely welcome the progress on this work. It's been good to see a movement forward every time we talk about it, which is very, very encouraging. On a personal level, I would recommend seeing the variation and not dampening it out too much. We can definitely see patterns and learn from the explanations there, but that's my personal view. Also, welcome the moving in and out of certain key performance indicators as they relate to the strategy. So that's excellent to see. And in some cases, we've got some benchmarking, which is also useful. How do we compare with elsewhere? So I think that's really all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. So if I then open this up, no, from a scrutiny perspective, I don't know if you probably haven't seen this latest data because it came just before publication point, but Graham.
We are prepared, however, Richard. Yeah, you're absolutely right. We haven't officially taken a look because Obion scrutiny will be looking on the 23rd, and we'll go into it in depth. But it is good, as has been said, to see the business plan reflected, the scorecard and the risks. But we'll do our detailed scrutiny then. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So if I then open it up to any further questions from members. Okay, marvellous. Thank you all. Just to reassure, well, perhaps not reassure Cabinet, Cabinet and portfolio holders will now be running through this with me on a 4-monthly basis, where we will be discussing some of the detail and looking perhaps at some, well, definitely in some cases, some of the underlying metrics that sit beneath this this data, and then talking that through with directors as well, not from the perspective of trying to beat people up, but trying to identify where things are working, where they're not working, and how we can improve where we know we've got issues that need to be addressed. Some of them are going to be tricky. I mean, how we handle some of the stuff around schools is really going to be interesting, but that's something to develop as we move forward. Right. At that point, I am happy to move the proposals. Do I have a seconder, please? Yeah. All those in favour? Thank you. We then move on to agenda item 7, undoubtedly the highlight of, I'm going to get in trouble now, but undoubtedly the highlight of this Cabinet report, which is the update on Council response to the climate emergency. Nick.
Thank you, Richard. It's a very comprehensive report. I'm hoping that, as well as my colleagues have read this, that members of the public and other members have read this. So, like the report you've just presented, Richard, I don't intend to read it out in detail because it's a number of pages, and we don't want to be here until early afternoon to read the report. However, I do want to highlight a number of points within this. But before I do that, I'd like to thank the officers, Sarah and her team, for the report that is in front of us. It's a very comprehensive. It covers a range of issues across all of the delivery themes that the climate team have been tasked to work on. And I'll touch on some of those delivery themes as I go through the highlights. But before I do that, I'd just like to reiterate one point for colleagues who are here today, that the climate team currently consists of 6 people within the council. And when you read the amount of work and energy and effort that they carry out, which is summarised in the report, I think we should be absolutely congratulating the six of those individuals for the work they're doing on behalf of the council and the county. And the good news is that I will come on to this later when I talk about the financial position of the team here, is that we continue to punch significantly above our weight in terms of attracting central government grants for the work that we're doing here. And as a consequence of that, I'm pleased to confirm here that we are about to increase the headcount by another 3 members of staff. So that's a 50% increase in the headcount. And that is as a direct result of the grants that we've successfully applied for. Sarah Vowles, the director, said to me a few weeks ago that there was a bit of nervousness about applying for the HUG2 grant because we had a very short period of time in which to submit it. But for those of you who have read the detail, you will see that we were successful in being awarded over £3 million from central government to continue with the homes upgrade strategy. And in actual fact, that amount could be increased from 3.6 million to 7.2 million, depending upon the complexity and the comprehensive nature of what we're delivering. And as a consequence of that grant being awarded, we're able to recruit additional members of staff to the team, as I suggested. So there is a fantastic track record of the team being successful in what they're delivering, successful in how we're trying to improve and increase the level of activity that we are doing as a council, and that brings with it additional members of staff. So I wanted to put that at the forefront of what I want to say today, to reiterate the point that we should be extremely grateful for the staff that we've got. And finally, on that point, it was a surprise, I think, to officers, this is what they said to me last week, that we managed to fill those 3 roles in the first round of interviews, which is an exceptional performance. And I think that demonstrates 2 things. It demonstrates that this council is absolutely committed to addressing the issues of the climate change emergency. And it also shows that this is an organisation and a council that people want to come and work for. And again, I think that reflects the quality of the work that comes from the offices and the quality of the output from the work that the offices do. So again, congratulations to the team for that piece of recruitment and that additional members of staff that are coming into the team. I will now just take you through some of the elements I wanted to highlight. And I don't make any apologies for this, because I think as a local authority, we should be proud of what we've achieved. There certainly isn't any complacency within the offices and complacency within the authority, but this is an opportunity for us to take stock and actually reiterate some of the successes that we've had. So in 2021, the council received an excellent rating of 81% in Climate Emergency UK's Council Climate Plan scorecards. We were ranked as the 5th best unity authority in the UK for its response to climate change. The council has also recently been awarded the Bronze Carbon Literate Organisation Award. And that last element there relates to the number of staff that we have taken through carbon literacy training. There is a target for that to become silver in a very short period of time, which will involve more staff members being trained in being carbon literate. And indeed, I've asked officers to extend that to members, to make sure that members are included in that process. And that sits within the KPIs in the balanced scorecard that Richard alluded to earlier in the previous item. On our target for the council to be carbon neutral by 2030, Anthesis, who are working with us, produced an independent report that said the council is in a very strong position to meet this carbon neutral commitment. Since 2014-2015, our greenhouse gas emissions have been reduced by 75%, which again is something we should be proud of. Unfortunately, due to the timing of this report, we don't have the data for 22-23, but we should have that, and we should be able to report on that in the next update to Cabinet and full council in October. As many of you will know, in November 22, the council was assessed by local authority officers in the peer review, and amongst many compliments that were put in front of the local authority, we were deemed to be excelling in the work that we are undertaking to address climate change. The climate change strategy, which is informed by the Scrutiny Task and Finish Group, and I'm grateful for the work that Graham is leading as chair of the Climate Emergency Task Group, who had a meeting on Friday of last week, which I unfortunately wasn't able to attend, but I have watched it back, play a vital role in making sure that we are on track, provide a really strong scrutiny of the work that we're doing. And I think that was reflected in the report, which said that there is what we are doing is very much seen as our day job, but in many other local authorities would be seen as being exceptional. As I mentioned, we have performance indicators that we'll be tracking against. That can be read in Appendix 1. I then wanted to talk about some of the delivery themes, and the first one I wanted to talk about was what we call adaptation and resilience. And you'll see that it's gone out in the press release last week. And I want to talk about a number of things. Salisbury River Park. It's the council's flagship climate adaptation project. There is a newsletter available as part of the report, but it's a significant piece of activity there which will improve whole elements of what's happening down in Salisbury. As a local authority, we are investing an extra £1 million between 22-23 and 24-25 into empty gullies and help flooding in the county. This is in addition to the investment that we spend annually of 1.3 million on emptying gullies. So it's a significant improvement, and we're focusing on the areas that are most at risk of flooding. We've already started to see the new equipment that we've bought having an effect. with more than 1,000 extra gullies emptied and 120 tonnes of debris removed since October 22. I then want to move on to transport, and I know this is something that has been frustrating for all members. Electric vehicle infrastructure. There have been some challenges with our existing infrastructure, with many of the units being offline and unrepairable due to their parts no longer being available from the supplier. We have undergone a significant re-tendering process, replacement of all charging units, and a new provider has been selected. And again, if you refer to Appendix 3, you will see there the list of all the sites that are due to be repaired through the balance of this year, with most of the fast charging units being replaced by the summer of this year. We've had, in terms of our external activity, we've had a really successful webinar with town and parish councils, and they are now able to apply for grant funding to install public EV charging infrastructure in their communities, with Wiltshire Council providing an element of grant funding where that's applied for. Again, that detail is contained within Appendix 3. I don't make any apologies to referring to the appendix, because that will hopefully answer a significant number of questions that might come forward, both for members of the public and members here. I know that my portfolio holder, Tamara, has had a particular input into the issue of EV charging, so thank you for that work that you've done there, Tamara. Moving on, in terms of the next delivery theme I want to focus in on, and I'm not going to go through all of the reports, as I've said. I want to talk about what we're doing with regards to housing in the built environment and the issues on planning. As my colleague, Councillor Botwell, referred to, we are at an advanced stage of producing a new local plan. But within the local plan, we will specifically refer to and talk about site allocations that are located in the most sustainable locations, policies that promote sustainable forms of construction, and policies that take opportunity for supporting renewable energy proposals in appropriate locations. And I want to, if I may, just step out of the report and talk about how that is currently being delivered locally. Fortunately for me, it's in my division of Bower Hill. We are due to have a new primary school planned and developed and commissioned to provide infrastructure for the new houses that have been put in there. And I'm pleased to say that when I've worked with the schools team there, they have confirmed that that school will be built and designed to be carbon neutral, the first primary school being built in the county that satisfies our climate change ambitions. And that blueprint they're putting together will then be used for all future primary schools that are being built within the council area. So there's evidence of, even ahead of the local plan, where we're delivering and committing to elements that will sit within it and be an integral part of it. And importantly, a member of the climate team will sit alongside the in-house planning team to develop that, to make sure that our climate change commitment is absolutely adhered to. I then want to talk about what we're doing with the natural environment, if I may. Scooting through this. Wiltshire Council is one of the main organisers of the Southwest Agri-Tech event for farmers and landowners, which was held at the middle of last month. And I think what that demonstrates to us is our commitment not just to engage and organise engage and deliver our own infrastructure, but to be broader in our influence and to help those members of the Wiltshire community who also have a commitment to become carbon neutral. The council have a commitment to become carbon neutral by 2030, and we set that as an ambition for the whole of the county. So we need to upgrade and upweight our external focus, and that's an example there of where we are engaging more effectively with our external bodies. We've also had an interesting over the last couple of weeks in terms of natural environment. I've been to 2 meetings with the National Trust and English Heritage to look at what's happening there with the Wiltshire Chalk Partnership in terms of how we're improving the quality of the natural environment. And the reason I couldn't attend the Climate Emergency Task Group last week is I was at a meeting at Stonehenge on Friday, where the National Trust was showing us what they're doing in terms of how they are re-gearing their agriculture land, how they are reducing the amount of arable farming in the farms that they are the freeholders of, and how they're returning a lot of that chalk land to grass and for grazing. And that has a significant impact upon the overall natural environment of Wiltshire. Wiltshire is the largest remaining chalk environment in the country. There's been significant degradation over the last few years. And one of our commitments is to make sure that we are supportive of our partners to make sure that we restore and retain as much of that natural environment as possible. And they were two very useful meetings, and it was certainly worthwhile working and meeting those external bodies. In terms of the final things I want to talk about are really to do with the internal things that we're doing in terms of being a carbon neutral council. We only have direct control over 0.5% of carbon emissions in Wiltshire, but can use, as I've mentioned, our other levers and our democratic mandate to have a wider impact upon emissions, including influencing our strategic partners on their infrastructure projects. I mentioned the meeting I had on Friday. A summary of that activity is shown in Appendix 4. And coming to the end of what I wanted to talk about, as I mentioned, our carbon literacy training programme is gathering pace. And as part of that, each member of staff who undertakes that training is required to make 2 pledges setting out actions they will take in the workplace to reduce the council's carbon footprint. As I mentioned, that's going to be rolled out and extended to our elected members, and we'll be asking our members to make the same commitment to demonstrate how serious we are about this. In terms of our procurement, we recently, as you know, have procured a new infrastructure contract with Milestone. And one of the key elements of the awarding of that 5-year contract had a key focus on reducing carbon emissions as part of the council's business plan. I have visited myself one of the new depots that Milestone have taken over, and it was really encouraging to see the amount of EV charging points that have been installed at that new depot. And it was also gratifying to see that the parish council concerned, when they commented upon that, recognised in their submission and comments at their planning meeting a few weeks ago, the efforts that are being made for Milestone directly and this council indirectly to achieve our climate goals. The final thing I wanted just to touch on, in case those of you have read it and looked at the financial attachments, the appendices that attach financials, if you look at it in broad brush terms, particularly in Table 1, the capital programme, you might think that there's been a reduction in our commitment to what we're spending our money on. But I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. If you look at Table 1, the second line, there's LED programme, and it shows previous year's spend of 11.5 million, whereas there's only a budget this year of £700,000. That's very simply explained, is that 11.5 million absolutely is previous year's spend. It's the LED relighting, street lighting project, which has now come to an end. So it would be unnecessary for that same level of capital to be taken forward into the budget for 22-23. So it's not really valuable to look at the capital spend there as a direct comparison, because they are future years spend and it shows what's in the budget for this year. Officers will be able to answer specifics on that. But I think what's really interesting is when you look at the capital spend that we've had over the last few years, which is £25 million, nearly half of that has come from grant funding. So that reiterates the point I made earlier on, that how successful we are as an organisation in getting central government grants to enable us to carry out our capital plans. Table 2 has the revenue programme. That's the revenue spend that's contained within the medium-term financial summary, which we've all seen at full council. And finally, in Table 3, I just wanted to reiterate one final point. In there, you'll see there's the reference to the home upgrade grant, the HUG 2 project that I referred to, where there's a capital grant there for £3.6 million. The only reason that hasn't been shown in Table 1, in Table 2, is it hasn't yet been allocated. And when we have the Q1 financial update that will come to Cabinet and full council, that will be shown there. And I just wanted to conclude at that point and say, I think this is a really good report that we've been presented to you by officers today. It absolutely summarises the progress that we're making across a variety of areas. I am confident that if we continue the focus, we will continue to be successful and be on track to deliver our targets as a local authority. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you for a comprehensive update. I wanted to echo the point about the team we've got here. I attend a lot of events involving the LGA and discussions with the LGA and also then with UK 100. And it's very clear that the work that we are doing and the work that our team is doing is being recognised across the local government sector. It's really good when you get that reflected back, because it's a good justification to suggest that we're not only delivering what we say we're doing here, but that's being confirmed. Just to touch very briefly on national involvement, I know that often comes through. I also spoke at with my UK 100 hat on at a parliamentary reception earlier this year. And I think perhaps most interestingly, and you were talking about the environment, and it's really, really important we link from a Wiltshire perspective, climate and the environment, not treat them as the same topic, but as linked topics. But I was asked to be on a panel at the first Biodiversity Net Gain conference, which was really the industry coming together to try and understand how Biodiversity Net Gain would be working, particularly to get a handle on how councils and a government are going to be wanting to apply it. Really, really interesting feedback there on the need for off-site, long-term, serious provision and concerns about a lot of the attempts to provide on-site biodiversity net gain, which then conflicts with people wanting areas mowed for playing football or hedges that don't have enough sunlight, become completely overgrown and therefore aren't functional for reptiles. So it's really interesting watching that national debate and seeing that Wiltshire is very much seen as a leader in that, which is great. Any other comments from Cabinet? Laura?
Just briefly, I'm always impressed with how much this team seem to do and then the speed with which they work. So I really support this. And I think the other interesting point is in appendix, I'm not sure which one it is, but appendix 2, which is the work of the area board. And I do think that what happens in our communities is really important in this respect, that if our own communities can come together for their own initiatives in this area, then that has much more impact. So I think we should do everything we can to support those initiatives.
Ian.
Kind of difficult to add to everything that's gone before on that, but I did want to reflect when I read the report that when you engage with somebody in talking about this subject, they've got one or two or three issues on their mind, be it agriculture, environment, electronic vehicles, active travel, housing, or whatever. What impresses me about the work that is being done and how this report shows it is the comprehensiveness of it. The comprehensiveness across the totality of our organisation. Remind ourselves we're responsible for less than 5%, and yet here we are addressing that 5%, on target for that 5%, but leading so much more in this. But also the comprehensiveness from the big projects right down to the tiddly little projects. So, I mean, just in my own little area, you've got in 3 leisure centres, one of them, the biggest set of air source heat pumps in the country, and down at the bottom end, we've got a project to recycle goggles or whatever. It sounds trivial when you talk about it, but if you think that is going on across the whole organisation, then it's impressive. And it's right to be doing it. So I just want to briefly reflect on that and say I do recall in a council meeting, a councillor saying, you know, we're very good at talking the talk, but we need to walk the walk. Well, if you can't see from that we are well and truly walking the walk, you haven't read the report.
Thank you. Sorry, just a second, Carolyn, just to build on that comment, I think one of the other things, and I think the team should also take great comfort in the work they've done, is seeing how partners, particularly in the private sector, the Public Service Board, have picked up after our initial briefings And you could see at the initial briefings, there were some glazed faces and people thinking, oh my goodness, what does this mean? Within what, a year, 18 months of that, they are, well, they're catching up rapidly. Salisbury Hospital have got some great projects ongoing. The Army have got great projects. And if you think back to where they were 18 months ago when we started collectively discussing it, I think they're also following the example that we've set because we're able to tell them, look, this works and it saves money. So yeah, I think that's really important. Sorry, Caroline, you wanted to come in.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to flag one particular item. It's on page 48 of the pack, and this relates to the importance about having the resources to do the work. I mean, this team of 6 have done a phenomenal amount, but the more people we can have to apply to the effort is all to the well. And I just wanted to flag that we've had a government grant from the Capability Fund, which will enable us to provide officers going forward to really focus on the whole EV charging infrastructure. EV charging is really, in people's faces, if you like. I mean, it's all very well saying go green, get a car if you can't find lots of places to charge it. And it's one of those ones that residents really notice that it's there. And so I think it's really important to flag that we're getting these grants, as has been highlighted, because it's been recognised we're able to do stuff. And this is going to give us the resources to really go much further in terms of our infrastructure, planning our infrastructure for EV charging.
Thank you. If I have no other comments from Cabinet, if I then come to Claire or Joe, who's covering this one.
I'll try not to say anything that Graham's going to say, because I was on the meeting on Friday. Yeah, 4 years on from declaring a climate emergency, I think it's very clear that there has been a significant culture change here, which is fantastic to see. I'll echo thanks to the climate team who've done a lot of work and very productive work. So yeah, absolutely huge thanks to them. I think the KPIs absolutely getting there. Obviously, look forward to seeing that completed. Or in a complete state. I did want to mention the section about the area boards, and just to recognise that a lot of the activity listed in there is by our partners rather than the area boards, and just I think it's good to be very clear about that. We've heard that we are, as a council, 5th best, which is great. I guess there's a lot of other councils across the country that are really putting their foot on the gas. I hate to say that phrase in this context, but so we do need to keep the momentum there to keep moving forwards. We've still got quite a significant journey to take over the next 7 years. So although there's a lot of stuff in here to be pleased about, let's be very cognizant of the journey still to take. The carbon literacy training that we've heard about, training 60 people, fantastic. I very much look forward to all members being invited to take part in that training and making pledges. The organisation itself, of course, is a lot bigger than 60 people, so I guess there's quite a significant journey to get everybody trained up in that. Yeah, I think that's really all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If I then turn to Graham.
Thank you, Richard. First of all, the task group, it was really good that we saw this before Cabinet. It really gave us a chance as an opportunity to take a look at it. I'd like to compliment Nick because I could repeat all the highlights, but he's already done that and the report is very comprehensive. We had some really good questions early on from before our meeting on Friday from Councillor Vigar, and questions from the team, which were Ariane answered them very well, and we almost got to a point where we were sort of picking on the smallest items, but that's robust scrutiny, isn't it? Yeah. There were some questions on agriculture which weren't covered, but they will be covered on the 23rd because we've got a meeting, and I think we ought to thank the task group too, because I think without our strong direction early on, we may not have been exactly where we are today because we did push hard early on and it seemed an impossibility, but we are getting closer. So obviously, well done to everybody. I think that we're in a position to move forward with this now, and the task group will be keeping an eye on what's going on and making absolutely sure that we follow the plan. But compliments to everybody involved so far. Thank you.
Thanks. And I think agriculture is a good example of the complexities we face with this. A responsibility for agriculture pretty much invariably lies with central government, with DEFRA. Yet, if you look at the implementation on the ground of better practice, people tend to turn to the council to do it. So it's one of those really tricky areas where people are asking us to act, farmers are asking to act, and then all the responsibility sits somewhere else. So, yeah. If I then open it up to comments from any other members, please. Tamara. Duke, if you go and sort of take a seat somewhere, there's a mic. That side and then...
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, everyone. Nick's given a really comprehensive overview of the report, and thank you for the comments from other members and from Graham leading the Climate Emergency Task Group. I just wanted to speak to a few points that have been raised. Firstly, Claire mentioned the role of area boards, and I think it's really important to recognise that area boards have a vital role in facilitating action within the community. It's not just about councillors and the area boards themselves doing work, but bringing forward initiatives and actions. And to highlight a couple, Councillor Suzanne Wickham has worked really well and is bringing forward, as many people probably know, a pollinator corridor in the Ethandune area. And there's some fabulous work going on there. And in my own area board in Devizes, we're working really closely with Sustainable Devizes, looking at air quality. We held a whole area, well, a large chunk of an area board meeting devoted to that, working with partners across the whole area. And one of the things that will be taken out of that are some specific actions on working with schools to improve school journeys and active travel rather than children being taken to school by parents in their cars. Claire also spoke about the carbon literacy. And yes, we were delighted to secure the Bronze Carbon Literate Organisation Award for 60 members, officers who have gone through the carbon literacy training. But it absolutely doesn't stop there. As you may know, there are plans now to take that forward to 700, including councillors. And I'm looking forward to working with the climate team to embed that much further across the organisation. So in summary, I think there is always much more to do. As Claire said, you know, there's 7 years for us to get to the targets and the ambitions that we've set. But I'm very confident that we have a fabulous team in place, not just within the climate team, but actually across the whole organisation, because many of the delivery themes that we have are reliant on expert officers in other parts of the organisation, particularly highways, to deliver on those. So I think we're in a good place, much more to do, but thank you to everyone for the support and the commitment that has got us this far.
Thank you. Any other members? Yes. Please, Tony.
Thanks very much indeed. It's a very small point, and it's on paragraph 30, where we talk about the team taking on EV charging for residents without parking. So we have, in my division in particular, and I'm sure many others as well, have a number of dwellings which were local authority and may now be either local authority or housing association, or in some cases, or in fact in many cases, sold off. But these dwellings were built without parking spaces. And that parking space infrastructure for local authority housing is something which is going to become more and more acute as we get nearer the date when we're no longer able to buy combustion engine propelled vehicles. So the team, which has been benefited from the LEVI Capability Fund, would it be possible for Wiltshire Council to commit to this work continuing after these funds have run out? Thank you very much.
Thank you. A really good point and question. Caroline.
Thank you very much for the question. And I'm very empathetic to what you're saying. Our anticipation is that these funds will continue. So that once we've received funding and we will secure extra resources, that they won't just fall off after another couple of years. I cannot guarantee to that, but it is our expectation that they will be maintained, and so we will be able to maintain the resource. And although there's a line here, funding is expected to follow in due course, we're also anticipating some further funding to actually help with the physical infrastructure elements of it too. So I think it's a sort of watch this space. We're active and proactive on it, and I fully understand what you're saying. And I would possibly suggest we need to talk to our planning colleagues as well about the importance of ensuring that future building, all future homes, even those that are including those that are in flats, not just on their own space, have access to parking facilities where EV charging can be supplied.
And we can't leave our council estates behind on this. We absolutely can't. They are the worst designed in terms of accessibilities of cars, because they were mostly built in an era when one car was the norm, not 2 point however many it is now. And yeah, there are not good solutions that come to mind, even if we look at the ability to charge potentially through lampposts and things like that. If you look at the way people park and the scramble for parking, that's not going to be a solution. I think we also need to bear in mind there are still some questions about whether electric is the answer to cars or part of the answer to cars, but we need to see what happens on that side as well. Thank you. Any further comments? Sorry, you want to come back in, Claire? Yeah.
If that's okay, and I just wanted to reflect on what you just said about council homes and providing EV. Could we bracket in with that homes that are provided by housing associations? Because I think making charging available to those tenants is just as important.
Yes, I'd said council estates. They now run our council estates, and whether we run them or another RP runs them, you've got exactly the same problems in place. Sorry, Phil, did you want to come in?
Only to say whether a registered provider would put EV charging in would really, they simply wouldn't put EV charging in. It would be down to the tenant to do that. I mean, there may be grants coming forward at some point, but at the moment that's not currently in place. So I can't imagine any of them will currently be building that into their business plan. But you are right in that we do need to look at the planning system and ensure that there's capacity on those estates and around our affordable housing to ensure that the facility can be provided.
Thank you. I'm not seeing anyone else indicating. Oh, tomorrow you want to come back in? Please do. Please use the mic, otherwise people online can't hear.
I just wanted to remind members on EV charging that the scheme that was brought forward for town and parish councils, which I believe 35 expressions of interest have been worked through, could potentially be used for that purpose. And I would encourage all members when they are talking to their parish councils, to highlight that, that very challenge. I know that the highways team are currently working with 35 potential parishes projects, but there may well be potential in the future for some to be added to that if others don't go forward. And as I said, I would encourage members to look at that opportunity once again. There was an excellent webinar back in September, which I think is still on the website, so that could be reshared.
Thanks. And without prolonging that debate, I'll just mention group capacity as well. But long way to go. Any other comments? In which case, Nick, if you can move the proposals in the report.
I will, Richard. I did actually just want to make one.
Please, sorry, yeah.
I wanted to respond and hopefully add to the comment that were made about area boards and area boards being conduits within our local community. I'm sorry that I failed to mention the Wiltshire Climate Alliance when I spoke previously, because I did intend to do so. I think we have a very good, respectful relationship with the Wiltshire Climate Alliance. And I just wanted to bring up here in terms of Cabinet and in front of members is that we actually had a briefing session with the Wiltshire Climate Alliance on the 25th of April. So that was last week ahead of Cabinet. And we had Bill Jarvis there, Andrew Nicholson, who's their new chair, and Julie Staunton, who lives in the Wiley Valley. And they have, as you'd expect, they were very challenging in that meeting, but they made comments like, and I'll quote specifically, this is music to our ears. And I think it's important that we recognise that they are a critical but supportive friend of the council. And that's actually what they said. We want to help. Bill Jarvis said, we want to help. We want to be a critical friend. So we will continue to enhance and develop that relationship with them. And specifically around the issue of how we can reach out into parts of our communities that our council doesn't ordinarily reach out to, that our area boards don't ordinarily reach out to. And certainly one of the takeaways from that meeting is that Julie Strawson, who is in charge of their comms, is going to work with specifically Tamara, who is a comms expert in her professional life, to find out how we can maybe develop some joint information, some joint comms that will go out to reach, to quote a phrase, to reach the harder to reach elements of our community that we don't necessarily engage with. So I wanted to put that on. And having finished there, I would like to commend the report to Cabinet and say we accept the contents of the report.
Thanks. I'll second that. All those in favour? Thank you. We then move on to agenda item 8, which is proposal to retain, invest in Silverwood School, Chippenham and Trowbridge campuses. Laura, over to you.
Thank you. I'm going to introduce the report and then Jane's going to do more detailed update. And I just really want to start by saying I really welcome this paper. I think our role in education a lot of the time is looking into the future. We're constantly looking at trends and population growth and birth rates and where communities are expanding. And this, I suppose, this next iteration of this project is one that started, gosh, probably 8+ years ago when we realised that we needed more special school places. And as you will know, we spent a lot of time getting to the point where we realised that we wanted to expand the site at Roud, and I feel that that was absolutely the right thing to do. But we also know that we don't want it just to be about special school places. We created a system of excellence, which is all about ensuring any child with an extra educational need will have the right provision in the county. Now, that could be a resource base within a primary school, and we're also increasing those resource bases within secondary schools, both at Clarendon and John of Gaunt. But this paper is about specifically ensuring that children in Trowbridge and Chippenham, who are currently at those sites at Silverwood of Trowbridge and Chippenham, will stay there for their primary education and then move to the newly expanded site at Roud. And I give my full support for that. And I'm going to hand over to Jane, who'll do the detail.
Thank you, Laura. As with Laura, I'm very pleased that this has now come to the table because I think it represents a significant investment in supporting young people with SEND. We do have a shortage of special school places, and this will help address that along with all the other work that it has been done. We'll focus on this proposal today, but there is a huge amount of work going on across the area. And Laura talked about the system of excellence. We also have something called OPAL, which is ordinarily available provision for learners, which is a programme we do with all of our mainstream schools because we do absolutely believe in young people with SEND remaining in a mainstream school if they possibly can. So the proposals briefly are to retain and invest in Silverwood, Chippenham and Trowbridge campuses, to change the age range at Chippenham and Trowbridge, and to increase the numbers across the whole Silverwood estate, it is a number of campuses, from 410 to 460. Cabinet colleagues and others will no doubt remember the pre-consultation proposals which we brought here last December, and they arose in turn from Cabinet decisions in November 2019 and our agreement to undertake statutory consultation necessary to inform our decision-making. That consultation has been carried out and we will be making our decision today whether to approve the investment in Silverwood and Chippenham. The formal consultation was launched on the 30th of January 2023 and ran for 5 weeks. The normal period of time is 4 weeks, but we agreed to extend it for 5 because it straddled the half-term period. We wanted to make sure that everyone could be engaged with it. It was open to the public, and significant effort was made to engage with the 430 Silverwood pupils and their families. The full description of the consultation process, the feedback received, and the Silverwood School responses to the issues raised is in Appendix A of the report. The consultation attracted 141 responses, as well as live feedback from face-to-face sessions and for email submissions. And we would like to extend our thanks to all of those who engaged in the consultation for their very considered and thoughtful feedback. Responses came from a range of stakeholders, including 77 parent carers. That's approximately 20% of the total number of parent carers at the school. 53 staff and 11 other respondents. It's clear within the guidance for statutory consultation that decision makers should not simply take account of the numbers of people expressing a particular view. There's a responsibility to give greatest weight to responses from those stakeholders most likely to be affected by a proposal. So in this case, that would be especially the students and the parents at the affected schools. Overall, there's been a lot of engagement and excitement amongst pupils for the development of the Silverwood School, and the students were positive about the changes, as indeed were the majority of respondents. The consultation demonstrated very high levels of support for retaining Chippenham and Trowbridge campuses. 96% of the respondents agreed with that. 95% also agreed with the proposal to invest and upgrade the 2 campuses. There was 65% support for an increase in overall registered place numbers across the whole Silverwood estate, and there was a wide recognition of the need to grow the number of special school places because of the rising demand. There was 51% for support to change the age range from primary phase at Chippenham and Trowbridge, and a further 18% of all respondents were unsure or had no opinion. However, there were 35 parent carers who did not support the proposals to amend the age range. And their concerns were several. They were over transition arrangements and anxiety over disruption caused by the relocation of pupils between campuses, perceived limitations of choice of secondary age provision, extended travel times and suitability of transportation plans, specific concerns for students with profound multiple learning disability needs, including whether they'll be able to access all the specialist facilities offered at Roud campus, concern around education by new and unfamiliar staff, reduced access to healthcare and support, especially in emergency situations, concerns that children and young people will not access their local communities for life skills, and they will not be visible to local communities if educated at Roud campus, and the impact on individual children. These concerns came predominantly from Trowbridge parents, and I think that's quite natural because the Trowbridge campus will experience the most disruption due to the amount of work required to bring it up to standard. It's very overcrowded, very dated at the moment. So having listened very carefully to the concerns, we need to be reassured that Silverwood School leadership team have really considered the feedback from the student, staff and parents, and that they're happy to put mitigations in place to minimise disruption and things. So there are several things that have been committed to here. Overall, it's important to recognise that the majority support this, and Silverwood School, their leadership team, continue to believe that the educational needs of the current cohort and future secondary age pupils are best served at the Roud campus. They think that because of the benefits of enjoying a comprehensive and varied curriculum together with their peers in state-of-the-art facilities, and they think that that offers the best secondary experience for all of their students. Detailed responses to concerns are presented in Appendix A, but the principal mitigations for change can be summarised. It's acknowledged that children with SEND experience change anxiety. The senior leadership team have promised that their pupils will remain at the centre of everything we do. They recognise that any change to a well-developed routine could have an impact on a child, and they commit to carefully thought out and developed transition plans which will be prepared and discussed with parents, carers, teachers and of course the child themselves. Transitions will be planned over weeks or months with scheduled visits to Roud to promote familiarisation and reduce anxiety, and these will be underpinned by robust and sensible transport plans. Transport concerns were raised by parent carers, as I said, and it's acknowledged that journey times to Roud may be longer for some pupils. The sites are 10 miles from Roud. However, journey times will be reduced for others, and congestion in car parks around dropping off and picking up will be reduced. You won't have queues of minibuses waiting with children sitting on them waiting to get out. That will help. And the school and our passenger transport unit are committed to ensuring journey times to and from the school will be minimised. Community visibility was an issue that was raised back in 2019 and again now, but we need to remember that teachers offer as a standard part of the Silverwood curriculum a range of trips and community visits to ensure that pupils experience their communities and benefit from a range of developmental life opportunities. All of the communities are involved in that. Devizes, Chippenham, Trowbridge, and pupils will have continued access to minibuses for planned trips. So just to go back to the rationale of the proposal, we need to meet the growing demand for special school places. It's predicted over the next few years to increase over 7%, between 7 and 8% annually, and that equates to 68 special school places per year. And as I said, it's only children who really need to go to special school who are being offered these places. We can secure the future of the Chippenham and Trowbridge campuses for 75 pupils per site. That's 150 additional places, and they will be in really good quality physical provision. There's a lot of work being done around the outside space too, so there'll be equity of provision across the 3 primary age sites. We do recognise that the communities of Chippenham and Trowbridge want these schools there. So, we're supporting that if we go ahead with this. We need to support Silverwood School and the excellent work they're doing. And we need to allow them to do this in the way that they most want to do it. If we don't do this, there are significant risks around not being able to provide places and not being able to provide quality places. We want to invest in having excellent education. The Silverwood Student Council were very keen on the proposals, and they want to create more space for learning and additional opportunities for students. They say things like, it's not fair for others who don't have a school. Children need to spread out and need space in the new school. It's also a cost-effective solution. This isn't new money. This is existing money that was allocated to Phase 5 at Silverwood Roud. the leadership team have come back with a different way of investing this money that actually will work very well. And I would like to support that. And we do need, finally, about the increase in pupil numbers. Given the rising demand, we do need to do this. And those are my comments.
Thank you. This has been a very complex and contentious issue at times. I think if I can recall the debate, and I can recall me reading thousands of pages of consultation when we reached the first decision. And I think then we had concerns about the sufficiency issues, about the data, about how places would work. We said that we'd need to see what would happen. We've done that. We've got a better understanding of data now, a better understanding of the position we find ourselves in. We've got a solution that, to my mind, will work moving forward, and we're now clearly getting the detail put into that solution to make sure it works effectively. So certainly, I don't know about you, Laura, but I'm really quite comfortable now with the position that we're in here, in terms of the service we will be providing across Silverwood on all of its sites. If I then open this up to anyone else from Cabinet who has any comments. Please, Nick.
Thank you, Richard. I have to say, Jane, I'm really encouraged by the level of detail from page 112 down in the report. In terms of, it certainly suggests the information that's contained within there, which summarises the consultation, the number of people who responded, who those consultees were. And I'm particularly pleased to see the comment at the bottom in terms of the mitigating action plan that's referenced and highlighted in there. And I think the fact that that's all wrapped around the equality impact assessment is a really strong piece of work. So I think the detail that's in there and the way it's presented, it has my full support.
Ian, thank you.
Ever so quickly, as one of those who had to sign every page in the previous, I think 600 page and then 300 page submission, all I can say is I think this is comprehensive, and I'm glad to see that we are adapting to the developing circumstances and keeping up with it. No, this is the right thing to be doing.
Thank you. If I have nothing else from Cabinet, if I then come to either Joe. No, according to my list, I've got Ian or Ian's representative first, and then I've got scrutiny.
Thank you, Richard. So, first thing I'm going to say, I don't think there's any surprise really to see within the consultation the huge support for the retention of the Trowbridge and Chippenham sites. And I think it was always clear that if those sites were going to be retained, they would need some significant investment. So I think, again, really welcome that commitment to the investment. Trowbridge site particularly needs some love and care. I think Jane's already alluded to, obviously, the deeper concerns about the change to the education phasing comes obviously from some Trowbridge residents and families who are obviously concerned about that, the various things that Jane alluded to with their young people then having to transition from Trowbridge to Chippenham. And again, Appendix A is very thorough, and I would expect the school to want to do everything they can to make things run in a smoother way and to come up with individual plans for those families. That said, there is obvious worry and uncertainty when you have a change such as this, and for families to be assessing whether it is the right thing for their young person. That is always going to be a bit of an issue. So I always seem to be the person who's always asking about timeframes, but actually I suppose that's one of the key things is, do we have a view now of how quickly the school will be talking with the families and starting to plan out those transition plans? I've got a couple of time plans. You'll probably have them all in one go, Laura. So one is to do with how quickly, because that feels quite urgent in order to allay some of those fears, certainly for some families where it is a real concern about those change. And then the other timeframes I have a bit of concern about. When the refurbishment takes place at Trowbridge, that is going to be a very difficult time, I think, for the school and for families, because there's going to be significant disruption to lots of people. So again, I'm looking at anticipated completion times there. And then I appreciate I do skim read things occasionally, but do we have a completion date for that move to education phasing? Conscious that with Trowbridge, we've got a significant number of young people currently using the site, and ultimately, once it's refurbished, we're looking at a site that will only accommodate 75. So again, it's trying to understand what those timeframes are, and then for those, as I said, for those families who have real specific concerns, whether this is the right thing for those young people, is how quickly will the school be working with them to work through that.
Okay, I can come back on that. The most important point to make is that we are already very much working with these families, and Sean, who is the head of Silverwood, and Jane had a conversation just last week when we had a SEND meeting to discuss this exact issue, that we know the ones who are concerned, and the school, not unsurprisingly, has been working with them. And I think, as you said, there is natural anxiety about change, and that is amplified when it's a child with SEND. But from my perspective, what I'm seeing is I don't want teenagers to be in the wrong facilities when their peers have moved on to bigger and better places. The thought of them being infantilized by staying in that environment, I think, would be wrong. And I think our role of the schools is to give the parents the confidence that what their child will be moving to will be right for them and so much better. And I think once you see the fabulous school that Melissa and her team are working on to create, and the facilities, that's where they will see the benefit for their child, and being with their contemporaries and growing up like any child does, which is they leave primary school at 11 and they go on to a secondary school to be with their contemporaries. And for me, that's more important than anything else, that they have those opportunities. Obviously, building works will cause disruption. You can't break an egg. You can't make an omelette without breaking eggs. I mean, that was inevitable. I don't know the exact timing, so I'm asking the team about that. But I really want to give you that reassurance that those conversations are already happening and will continue, and that sort of gradual change into the new school will happen as the project goes on. I don't know if any of the team can talk about the actual timings of the works to, yeah, I'll hand over to Melissa. Can you just introduce yourself?
Hello everyone, Melissa Hardwell, Head of Special School Transformation, and I, together with Sean, oversee the transition work that's proposed, as well as the works that's currently underway with the new build. So just to address some of the programme issues, in the first instance, you'll be aware that we've got the new build at Roud, and that's due to come on stream. Building work will complete this autumn. And so first of all, we need to make sure that everyone who is already in the school at any campus is really secure and ready for September 23. So making sure that all those places are available first. We will then, we will need a bit of time. We will let the school settle down, get ready for the new building, take occupation of the new building through the autumn and early in 2024. We will then look, for those of you that might not be aware, we've also got some works to do on the main building itself, and that's presenting a few challenges. That's what we call phase 4. And then we will turn our attention to phase 5, which is this particular proposal. The works that are underway, or proposed, I should say, for the Trowbridge campus, they're much more substantial. I'm actually going from this meeting today to Paxcroft, and some of the things we need to do as enabling works is to start the discussion, if we get the approval today, to actually use some of Paxcroft's facilities, particularly their green open spaces, to enable Trowbridge children to benefit from much more sort of green outdoor space than, I mean, they've got no green outdoor space now. So if this proposal goes ahead today, one of the things we will do is do some preparation work, and the children of Trowbridge will be able to enjoy shared space with Paxcroft from September. So we would like to do that work this summer, so we can realise some of those benefits straight away. However, the infrastructure works that's needed for Trowbridge will take a period of time, and they may take some decant as well. So we're looking at mechanical and electrical works. We will try to time that over a summer holiday, but inevitably there will be periods where children need to move. And we just need to think about the timing of that. So it could start it could take place summer 24, but we will look at the overall time frame and look where the school is and the readiness for that and their readiness for another change programme, because I'm sure Sean can talk about transitions in a minute. The work that is on Chippenham, proposed for Chippenham campus, that's much more light touch, that's cosmetic, pretty much cosmetic, and we can do that over a holiday period. Again, I'm not thinking until probably at least Easter 24 would be the expectation. But at all times, we need to plan this with the school, taking into account where the children are, and also where the leadership team and the staff of Silverwood, their capacity to manage what is a big change programme and adhere to the commitments that we've made to families as well, to make sure that we get those transitions absolutely spot on. So I think I'll pass over to Sean, if that's okay.
Hi, I'm Sean McEwen. I'm the executive head at Silverwood School. Yeah, it's been a long time, this one, hasn't it? It has been a significant journey. And I think that's part of the reason, really. I think for some of the, I mean, I'll bring you back to our vision, really, which is building community, inspiring learning. I think the community at Chippenham, and especially at Trowbridge, they've had a difficult time because it has been so uncertain for such a long time. And we're very keen for that to stop, really, so we can actually move forwards. And that change inevitably has brought around some anxiety for many of the parents and the children. And we've worked really hard to kind of ensure that's diminished as far as possible. And so we're in a situation now where we can retain those campuses, as colleagues said, which is a great thing. And my understanding is that was not always the case. And the other word that Jane used this morning, which is really important to us, and that's equity. And what we don't want to happen is, you know, we have this new build, which is a wonderful thing. However, we are conscious that we have a number of pupils who are on those other campuses, and we need to ensure there is equity there. So that's why, you know, we're very supportive of the investment in Trowbridge and Chippenham to ensure that there is some equity across the campuses. Yeah, and so in terms of those families who are anxious about them, and we've spoken to them, we're aware of who they are, and really it's just to reiterate the message that we'll be working side by side with those families and the children to ensure that we transition those children across in the best possible way. And I'm very confident that the team we have at Silverwood School will be able to do that. And I do think it's a good thing that we have the primary bases at Chippenham, at Trowbridge, and we also have a primary base at Roud as well. So parents, just like in mainstream environment, you take your children to your local primary school, which I think is a really important. It's something that we've kind of stood by right from the start. However, as colleagues have outlined this morning, in terms of the offer we can make the Roud campus, it is far greater than we can at Trowbridge and Chippenham. That's just the reality of the situation. And I think that transition of year 6 pupils moving on to their secondary provision is something that schools do up and down the country. And we feel that's the right thing to do. So we will support families, and we're very conscious of that, and we will do that to the best of our ability. And as I say, I believe we can do that confidently, and we'll be successful at it too.
Thank you. Jane, you want to come in?
Yes, I was saying I hope that helps to answer your question, Joe, and also in your going back and talking to people you represent and the families you represent. But I hope you can see here the commitment and the sensitivity that our officers and the school have, and words like secure, things. At the moment, the new build at Roud isn't yet open, so it's hard for families to have a vision of what it could be like for their children. So hopefully. Sean mentioned it's been a long time for the families in Trowbridge. There's been uncertainty. if this gives people certainty, and then once the new build it round is open and they can see with their own eyes what a wonderful place it is going to be, that these changes and the continued commitment of officers and the school to work with families will really help make this a good outcome for everybody.
Joe, you want to come back?
Yeah, so I did want to just come back. I am also very cognizant there's a huge amount of ongoing change and uncertainty for the whole community, for the school, including the staff. So are to be commended for, again, just continuing to work through that. And transition is difficult even in mainstream, involved in primaries and secondaries. So I suppose the only thing, I'm not sure I got the answer to, when would you expect that change to the education phasing to be finished by?
Sorry, please.
Well, we will begin that as soon as we can. At this moment in time, we're not entirely sure when that new build will be up and running. So as soon as we have meetings that are kind of ongoing, and as soon as we have a final date, then obviously we will put those plans into place. But in the background, of course, we're always doing that type of work. And there are children at the moment who do spend time with the Rail campus, who ultimately the intention is that they would be continuing their education there.
Please.
Just to add to what Sean said, just for a little bit of clarity, once the new build is ready to accept the full number of secondary age pupils, we expect the transition to be over weeks and months. So it's not years and years, just to be clear.
Thanks. If we then move on, I gather you are now John, Graham. It's a day of changing our roles and names.
Well, I am John, but John can't be here today. He sends his apologies, but rest assured, he had a briefing, as did the select committee on the 26th of April. So if there was anything that he wanted to raise, you could be absolutely certain he would have raised it. So I'm very happy just to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
The main thing that John raised was the point I made at the beginning, which is this is not just about increasing the number of special school places. This is about our system of excellence, which, as I said at the beginning, is about ensuring any child with an additional need gets the support they need. That doesn't necessarily mean within a special school. It can be just, as Jane was saying about Opal, and or resource spaces. But that's our aim, is to try and really avoid children going to special school if they possibly can. But ensuring that the system's in place to support them. So that was his key issue. And I was just giving him that reassurance that we're not just focusing on this, we're focusing on the whole system.
Thank you. So if I then open this up to any other members, any further comments? No, in which case, Laura, if you can please move the proposals.
So the proposals on page 87, that we approve the change to Silverwood School pupil numbers, increasing registered places from 410 to 460. That the Cabinet approves the change in age range on the campuses to deliver the operating model recommended by Silverwood School. This change is all through education at Chippenham, Trowbridge and Roud, to primary education at Chippenham and Trowbridge campuses, and all through education at Roud. And the Cabinet approves the refurbishment of Chippenham and Trowbridge campuses, funded from pre-approved Silverwood Phase 5 capital funding, with decision-making in respect of implementing the proposals delegated to the Director of Education and Skills.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. All those in favour? Marvellous, thank you. We then come to agenda item 9, the Wiltshire Design Guide draft for public consultation. Nick, over to you.
Thank you, Richard. Well, look, I think let's start off by saying that this is something which has been probably far too long in coming. But I think it is a recognition that good design needs to be at the heart of everything that we do in our vision for the county. And there's a lot of evidence out there that good design plays a very big part in people's overall well-being and how they view the area. And I don't think this is a surprise. If it's a choice between beauty and ugliness, And I'm afraid ugliness is sometimes what, the architects do come up with, and they think it's marvellous. But I'm on the side of beauty. And it's interesting to see that beauty is now a concept that government has recognised and is trying to build in to thinking. I actually also think there's a practical side here, because it's unfortunately the case that some of our housing developments over the past few years have been bland, have jarred with the vernacular, have not been terribly well spatially planned. And I think, that has been a big part, not the only part, clearly, but a big part in generating the antipathy towards new development that we see. And so there is a practical side here. I think, the King is probably one of the best advocates of this. And you look at the development at Poundbury and things, that new housing on quite a significant scale can be supported by local communities if they actually like the results of what is being proposed. And we've got another example of that in the extension of Newquay, which is proceeding. I can never pronounce it, Nansildon, whatever. Perhaps Mr. Brown might be able to, he's looking at me, help on that one. But it does appear that clearly there is far more buy-in for these well-designed, well-planned new communities and extensions to communities. So anyway, this document lays down how we, sets the scene and how we propose to do it. There'll still be a big role for neighbourhood plans and local communities to get involved in what is their particular design aspects that they are keen on. Because, county the size of Wiltshire, stretching from the Cotswolds, almost to the New Forest and elsewhere, it's just not possible to come up with, a potted view, and it's not right for us to come up with a one-size-fits-all sort of view of overall design. So I think there is the strong role for the local communities to do that, but this sets out the principles and the bases on which we want to see our future developments follow. And I think it'd be a good thing all round, and I think it will help connect with the people, quite frankly. Okay.
Thank you. No, that's great. And I would broadly agree. There is part of me that wishes we could have a design code that can be absolutely enforceable. But as you say, how you enforce that across Wiltshire, I have no idea where you even start coming up with a code you could apply to the entire county. So I think this is the best compromise, the best way forward that we've got. It sets a framework and it then enables it to be given a local twist through neighbourhood planning. So yeah. If I then open this up to any other cabinet member who wants to comment. Caroline.
Thank you. I was a little bit puzzled in section 8.1, expectation, creating an appropriate mix of uses. And the last paragraph there says, we encourage the application of the 20-minute neighbourhood idea to villages and rural areas too. So I'm puzzled on a number of fronts and would like to just check in as to what the broad intention is here. 20-minute neighbourhoods are otherwise known as 15-minute cities, and as we know, they've caused huge controversy in a number of areas, Oxford being the nearest one to us. So I'm puzzled as to why we're specifically mentioning this at all, why we're referencing it to our rural county full of villages and market towns, where I just can't understand the applicability. And also I'm concerned about the to, which implies elsewhere as well. So I was wondering if I could be given some help on this.
Well, I raised this, and quite frankly, my preferred wording would not have 20 minutes there. But I think you're getting this is not quite the same thing as the 15-minute neighbourhood or whatever that's been proposed in Oxford and Canterbury and all those other places. I mean, we're talking about, you know, a section of the county that 20 minutes is quite a large section of the county that can be accessed. And I think, you know, we understand that our small towns and our villages all act together, and that transport will be predominantly by local private vehicle, and you know that this is not going to change that. I think it's just the view that within a sort of notional area, you should try and have as many different forms of service and things provided. I don't think it's not the sort of prescription that you should be able to walk to everything within 15 minutes.
Thanks. And I think you're raising a really good point here. This is an area that has been deeply contentious across the country. I've pushed very hard as to whether we can develop a concept that works around villages and involves the car. So I don't know, a 15, 20-minute radius of travel by car, although even that's not going to work for all our villages. I would be really keen to see what the public feel about this through the consultation, because this document is now going out to consultation, and it would be really good to understand. I think that I've frequently said that vehicular transport is critical to the functioning of Wiltshire's economy, and that we need to look at how it is decarbonised, not how we try and force everyone to use a bus system that honestly, if you're in rural areas, doesn't much exist. Or the idea of cycling over large hills to get to your neighbouring town, or going significant distances that just don't make sense. So I think this is a critical issue, and it's one where I'm hoping the people of Wiltshire will give us a pretty clear steer, but who knows? Sorry, did you want to come back in, Caroline?
Only to the point that I understand what Nick is saying, and I think I probably understand broadly what we're saying here is we want to ensure that services are accessible, whether you're in a rural area or an urban area. It was the "to" bit that I also was concerned about, because it implies we are going to apply it to our urban areas.
Okay, I mean, I think my comment here would be, this is going out for consultation now. Let's see what people say. I think it's something we ought to be drawing attention to. I think we need that debate. I think we need to be reflecting in all of our planning what it is that the residents of Wiltshire feel will work for them in terms of this tension between active travel, cars, and getting around a large rural area.
I mean, it might be more appropriate to say 10-mile radius, 20 minutes.
So let's see what comes back from the consultation, and see what changes we feel might be appropriate from there. Laura, please.
I really welcome point 4.4 on page 30. I have a bit of an obsession about the need for terraced homes, because what I really hate, and I have a surround where I live, is a lot of detached homes with very short distances between them. And having lived very happily in a Victorian terrace in London, I think it's probably one of the best designed way of living possible, because if a house is a terrace, you've got the insulation, you've got that density that takes away this sort of wasted space between houses, where I've literally seen this much gap to make it detached, and yet I'm thinking that could make the house larger and warmer by doing that. And I really think we need to look at this more. I know there's an obsession with having a detached house, but actually, if we're looking at improving our carbon footprint, I think we should really push for this when we're looking at applications. And I also support the fact that they're saying use higher homes rather than larger plots, so that you can, the foundations remain the same. So let's use them and make them dense. But the flip side to that is that there are some developments that are so poorly designed, and there is no green space at all. And I think, again, my love of the Victorian terrace house was they all have a garden out the back and some form of space at the front. And I think small things like being able to dry your clothes outside rather than having to have them inside are just all these small things which I think make a huge difference. to make a better environment. So I am always a great fan of that. So I don't know how we amplify that. I don't know how we stop our house builders from from continuing to build small detached houses when I think you could build large terrace houses, which would make better lives for everybody. Rant over.
You look keen to come in.
Yeah, I am. It's interesting. Laura's picked up on one of the things I wanted to talk about. I'm really pleased by elements of Section 6 in here, and I think particularly to do with 6.7 that specifically says, let's create edible landscapes that support wildlife and better connect communities with food growing. And the comments in there about private gardens being big enough, your point, Laura, about, Victorian terrace houses had big gardens. It specifically says in here, gardens should have sufficient space for food growing, which is really important, and all gardens receive some direct sunlight, which is a challenge for some of the properties that we built most recently. And I'm grateful there's something in there referencing community orchards, need to be maintained, and trees and hedge types that produce fruit and nuts. I think there's some great stuff in here, and I agree with you. It's a shame it can't be a design code. So it would be nice to mandate that some of that stuff related to nature is actually put into it, but we can't mandate. We can only suggest.
Honestly, it's terracing I'd mandated. Nick Boshell and I have had intensive discussion on this. As a whole, as Cabinet, we haven't actually had a chance to go through the detail of this document, given the sheer scale of stuff that we get. But it's really encouraging to hear these points coming out, because I absolutely agree, Laura. Terrace housing creates better communities, in my experience, than these awful new developments where everything's just angled so you can pretend you don't have a neighbour, despite the fact their wall is 6 centimetres away from yours. Ian.
Ever so quickly, not going into any detail, I'm just pleased from the public health point of view that I know officers are involved in developing this, because having enough living space inside and having enough living space outside is important. It has an effect on people's health and well-being, and if we don't pay attention to that, we pay the price eventually with their health and well-being, and the council, the taxpayers' money.
Caroline again, yeah.
I've got one more in relation to section 3.2, and it's about respect for and enhancement of intrinsic local character. One of my pet hates is developments with street names like Meadow View. Apologies if anybody lives in Meadow View, but they're incredibly generic. They don't mean anything. In my local patch, where there was a development recently, we'd made a big push for local historic figures to be recognised in street names. And in one area, we just fell on blank ears. The developer wasn't remotely interested, and they wanted Meadow View equivalents. So it's a plea if we might be able to have some sort of entry there in relation to how we name our streets on newer developments.
Nick?
I don't think this requires anything. I think that as local authority, we have the right to demand and tell the developers to sling the hook.
My understanding is we have to approve names. So we could decide that Meadow View is no longer an appropriate name for Wiltshire, as we have far too many already.
Yeah, quite.
Meadow Court.
Certainly in the most recent development in Bower Hill, which is obviously built on the site of what was an RAF maintenance facility, all of the new streets there reference RAF heritage.
Yeah.
So we absolutely can mandate that where we want to.
Yeah, no, I remember a situation where it seemed to come up quite a lot, determining new names for buildings in London. And I found out that this block was on the site of some sort of religious place called St Quentin. And I said, right, we'll call it St Quentin House. And they said, oh, no, they didn't think that would be inclusive enough. Anyway, I said, well, sorry, that's what it's going to be called. And I inquired a few years later, and they said, the developer said, oh, it's all sold really well. In fact, that name was a really good idea because it's really made it seem quite exclusive. Anyway, there we go.
Jane, and then we will move on.
Of course, sorry, I couldn't resist hearing Nick's story. Marlborough Town Council, we had a very close call with a new road being called Elsie Knocker Close. She's apparently a lady who did a lot of work, I think, in the First World War, so she's a very, very important, sensible lady, but probably not the right name for a road.
Phil, go on.
Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, I was just coming. So, and Laura was obviously talking about terraces and how wonderful they are, but equally within the design guide, it does talk about not having straight roads. I think there are some sort of contradictions within. I mean, we heard Nick talk about the large private gardens to encourage people to plant, and then in 4.410 it talks about smaller gardens, which just about meet the needs of residents. So I think there's some inherent contradictions. So obviously, in itself, would be exciting to see what comes back, I think, but there's certainly, it would be interesting to see what comes out of the consultation. There's work to be done, I think.
Thank you. So if I then move on, Claire, Joe, who's covering this?
Thank you very much. It's a very comprehensive document. Really enjoyed looking through it. Just going back to the I've got a little anecdote on the road naming, which I would like to share because I just think it's a great story. The estate that I live in Chippenham, the roads were named after people who had died in the First and Second World Wars, and the local Women's Institute did some research on all of these individuals. They print up a little A4, laminate it, and tie it to the road signs every remembrance season. And I think that's a lovely way of involving the community in people that have an historical relevance and give meaning to that whole area. So I just wanted to say that because I just think it's great. And certainly on Chippenham Town Council, we do influence quite strongly how roads are named. So, you know, I think there's a role there. In terms of moving on to town councils, Chippenham neighbourhood plan is nearing completion. It's got quite a comprehensive design guide of its own. And my question really is, how does the hierarchy work there? Because obviously once there's a made neighbourhood plan and a subsequent design guide that becomes part of the local plan, I'm just interested to know. I think in 99% of cases, the two would overlap and there wouldn't be a tension. But I think it's important to recognise that there could be and how that potentially is dealt with. During the introduction, we heard about from Nick about the concept of beauty, which of course is in the eye of the beholder. And in some cases, different perceptions may well be there that we just need to be cognizant of how that is interpreted. And sometimes that beauty may be anti very large developments, and how do we square that circle? Again, the size of gardens, what's right in a more suburban area may be not the same for a much higher density, hopefully on brownfields in nearer to town centres, where it might be more appropriate to be building nice apartments with balconies where we can get more people living close to the facilities. So again, I think there's a balance to be taken there. I think that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, I mean, I think the short answer to your first question is that it's a supplementary planning document, and therefore it sits as part of the local plan ahead of neighbourhood plans. But I wouldn't. This is not a document designed to provoke conflict. It's quite the opposite. So I think, providing the neighbourhood plan has not veered into areas that are not, are not beyond its powers, then I don't think there should be. I can't see how there'd be, roles for conflict, to be honest. But famous last words, I suppose. But I don't foresee it being a major issue.
Thanks. I just to acknowledge that the potential was there, and I agree it's very likely.
But I do think if we're being honest with people, we have to be clear. Local plan trumps neighbourhood plan, full stop. That isn't my choice, that's national legislation. So if there is conflict, something is in the local plan, it in essence can overrule the neighbourhood plan. However, you try and avoid that wherever possible. If neighbourhood plans try and do what they shouldn't do and protect from the allocation of a strategic site, that's where it's going to go wrong. That's where we're going to get the conflict. On something like this document is deliberately, I would hope, broad enough to enable that local vernacular while still giving the strong context to try and avoid the cookie cutter nonsense that we've had built. Right. Jerry. Scrutiny.
Thank you, Richard. Not joining in too much about the naming of street names, but when our local hero, Shelley Rudman, won a silver medal, 2 roads were named after her, Shelley Road, Olympian Way. And if you go to consult with parish and town councils, they offer you the opportunity to name after, and I think Mark Connolly at Tidworth has got a road named after Connolly Road. So it's quite doable. I hope they don't one after mine, because the postman never be able to spell the surname. Relating to the design guide, we had a meeting, the Environment Select Committee, on the 14th of March. The main comments made by the Select Committee have been included in Appendix 2 of the report, so I do not intend to go into the further detail of that. I would add that we sought clarification about the role of the neighbourhood plans and village design statements as local design guidance, and we are reassured to their continuing importance. We therefore very much welcome the design guide and endorse the draft ahead of the public consultation. One thing I'd like to add is the concerns I've had, and I would say I've heard of people being called Captain Hindsight, but now looking back on housing associations, I think I'd have to call myself Corporal Hindsight, because we approved back in 1998 the sale of council houses to associations. Seemed like a good idea at the time, and I think it was the Saracens at the time. Moved on very nicely over the years, but in the last 2 or 3 years, there's been an increase in sales of housing association houses. And it may not notice or feel so much in big towns and cities, but in my area, there's been 7 sold in the last 2.5 years to members of the public. And I do know a couple of them, they do drink with me and come in and say, got it for a good price and probably a lot more value. But what I'm worried about is they're not actually replacing them in the areas where they're being sold from. So I don't know if there's a way that we can stop this from happening, because it seems to be creeping in and growing quite a lot. And then when you also look at, because we live in an affluent county, Wiltshire, a lot of the developers now coming in and building luxury apartments, various new builds that are far outpricing our younger people these days. And we're trying to find something for young people to be able to get on the ladder. And taking that ladder away from them at the social housing level in the local areas where they can't be supported by their families is something that concerns me. And it has resonated with some other members of the Environment Select. And I think some of you members here will know as you've seen them being sold off. So I don't know if we could be innovative in Wiltshire to say, stop selling your properties. I mean, I applaud Salisbury now. I look back and I think, do you know what? Salisbury did the right thing. Keeping their properties, not selling them. But unfortunately, it's the nature of the beast. I wish we could think of a policy to say, stop selling your houses, because we're supposed to commit to 100 a year new social houses on the plan. Well, if they build 100, they're selling 10 or 15. They're not giving us the criteria. So that is my beef off my cake. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. I can assure you, Jerry, we can't stop it. If we could, I would have stopped it. I think it's abhorrent that we are seeing particularly rural social rent housing being sold, and instead housing associations, because they argue it's too expensive to maintain, and instead affordable housing, so only 80% of market rent, being built in a market town somewhere as replacement, which is damaging the fabric of our villages. It's national policy. There's nothing that we can do to stop it. We used to have the ability to refuse, or to at least question, when they wanted to sell properties. I can recall as I first became portfolio holder, which must be 10 years ago now, I got a couple that went across my email, and then the policy changed and we weren't able to. So I absolutely agree. I think the behaviour of some of our housing associations is becoming reprehensible. I don't think there's any other polite way of putting it. I think they are losing their purpose, and I think they really need to get a grip on what their purpose is, and remember that they are there to help both house people, but also support the fabric of the society in which they're housing people. I suspect I'm going to have a lot of other people wanting to come in now, because we're all going to get wound up on this. Nick, and then Phil, by the sounds of it.
Well, look, I endorse that completely. I think there is a problem that too many social landlords have become property developers, and they see themselves as property developers because it's quite exciting and it makes them feel big and things. And you know, the more they do that, the less they are connected to you know their purpose, which is to provide social housing. So you know, I do think that is a problem. I would say that you can, you know, they do come to our area boards and things, and you know, use that opportunity to tell them what you think. And certainly when they propose to sell something in my area, I did tell them what I think of them. They won't speak to me again probably as a result, but there we go. I think it is important for us as councillors and elected representatives to make it plain what our thoughts are, and what they should be doing. They should be taking into account our views.
Phil, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just quickly. I mean, obviously, we're drifting outside the scope of the design guide, but I mean, just to add that we do have a pretty strong housing enabling team that work with the developers, and we are seeing. We saw last year it was 640 new affordable houses coming on stream. Obviously, it's so hard because it's not enough to meet the need, which is painful, and we're acutely aware of it. But we are working with the developers. We've also got quite an extensive purchasing programme. Part of that's going on through Stone Circle, of course, and part of the council. So we are seeing an increase in the stock. But it's a very challenging situation. We're extremely limited in what we can do about it. In fact, we can't really do anything about it because these companies they effectively operate as private companies. We have been told we're going to receive more of the receipt from the right to buy properties, but we just have to continue to, unfortunately, accept that at the moment is part of the landscape and just keep working with it. But we are doing that.
Thank you. If I then open this up to any other members. You want to come back, Claire, please?
If it's okay to come back on one other point that just occurred to me. Talking about working with developers, in Chippenham we have quite an oversupply of retirement properties, and I wondered if there's anything we can do to influence developers to provide more mixed developers, because there's quite an anti-feeling in the community, because a lot of younger people want to buy apartments and they can't because there are expensive older people's apartments on the market that aren't moving. I'll leave it there, but it is an issue that we need to address. Thank you.
Phil wants to come in, but the design guide is a way we could do something about that.
Just to add on that one, I mean, obviously it's down to the developer to decide upon their own business plan. Obviously, they work with our housing enabling team to get the numbers right, to make sure the affordable properties are there. But it is worth bearing in mind that with those properties, if they are selling, then generally speaking, well, if they're not selling, that really is a problem for the developer. But what would normally happen is with those kind of properties, people move into them and then they downsize from a larger home, which then frees up that larger home to go back on the market to support a younger family coming through. So it's about having the appropriate housing at the right stage for the different people within the marketplace to get that throughput and obviously maintain velocity in the market that provides people for the right homes as and when they need them. But obviously, if businesses are making poor commercial decisions, then I doubt they'll last very long to make them again.
I think the problem, as I see it there, it's less of a Wiltshire problem, though it's starting to creep into the mix that you see for rent and for sale. But if you look at somewhere like Southampton, you will see a dearth of really cheap flats, almost all of which are in over 55 accommodation units. And when you look into them, come with really quite high service charges, and no one wants to be in them anymore because the service charges are not matching retirement incomes. So, it's not being caused by developers, but it's being caused by the second or third generation of people who are then moving into these where they've been around for a while. We don't want the same thing to happen in Wiltshire. I agree. Caroline.
I think it's also something to include within neighbourhood plans. So certainly in my local neighbourhood plan, which has only just been made, it is absolutely very clear about the provision for the over 55s is very well met, if not saturated, and so they have specifically made that point. I'm not quite sure what force it has in terms of refusal of a planning application, but I think at least the tone can be set in the neighbourhood plans.
Thank you. I'm not seeing anyone else wanted to comment, so Dick, if I could ask you to please move the proposal.
Yes, formally moved.
Sorry, with your microphone on, please.
Sorry, formally moved.
Thanks. Seconded. All those in favour? Thank you. We've been running for over 2 hours. I'm going to suggest we have a 5-minute break before we proceed with the next couple of items, please. So we'll reconvene in, well, let's say 12:10. Right, thank you, everyone. Let's crack on, otherwise this will be the meeting that never ends. Right, we come on to agenda item 10, procurement of cleaning services. Ian.
Thank you, Richard. I think the last 5 minutes probably revitalised us, but I am disappointed that it's given the opportunity for Colin Gale to leave, because I thought he was going to persevere and stay for this item. And I see Mark's persevering with us. I am disappointed that Ian Thorne isn't here today, because, I know not the reason, because I know at our last cabinet meeting, he expressed disappointment at not hearing about the cleaning services contract. Well, here it is, especially for him today, not here. I am sorry. And not only that, just like buses, here are two procurement items coming along at once today. This one is about the procurement of cleaning services across our operational estate. We need to get this in place by the 1st of December this year. We take for granted, I think, when things are going fine, that cleaning just happens, but it doesn't just happen. It has to be acquired, managed, delivered, and so it has been very well. The previous procurement exercise on this was in 2016. At that time, there was a 25% saving delivered, and the annual spend prior to that was just shy of £1 million on cleaning. In that last exercise, by adjusting the cleaning regimes, removing some deep cleaning activities, and a general reduction in the number of operational buildings, which is a theme elsewhere that we're pursuing, from rationalisation, we've been containing those costs. And they vary over the year. Over the years. It's a dynamic feast in this, depending on what buildings and what changes there are. But it's been contained within the budget so far. We need to commence the process for doing that now. As I say, we've got to have a contractor in place, appointed by the 1st of December. One of the characteristics of our current contract is that there is no clause for uplift to allow price uplift. Therefore, we haven't borne the pain of what might have come to us, but therefore there is every likelihood that when we go to this contract, we could well see a 20 to 30% increase, I'm afraid to say. If we do come to that point, then we have to look back at the detail, see if we can make adjustments to reduce it back to contain within the budget, or we may need to be making provision in the medium term in this. It's a reality. All I can assure you is that the officers work very hard to make sure the service is delivered and to contain it within the financial envelope. So there's probably not a lot more to say about this. You've seen the papers. It went to scrutiny a month or so ago, and there was no great problem there. The risks in all of this, well, if we don't do this today, well, we end up with we risk having no cleaning service. If we do it, the principal residual risks are a deterioration in service. It's inevitable, sometimes inevitable. You let a contract and then the contractor's motivation is to try and cut his costs. Well, we have to address that by a strong relationship, by robust management and KPIs. It's what we do in this. And as I've said, if the tender price submissions increase, then we may have to find means to contain them in that. Overall, our budget for this is 0.82 million. So noticeably, we've taken that saving, and I'm repeating myself to say, but there is a risk in that going up. I think I'm at the point of saying, please, any questions or comments?
Thank you. Do we have any comments from Cabinet? I think my only reflection on this is that when you compare it with the 830,000 that Salisbury are spending every year just to clean their toilets, I suspect we've got a relatively good, efficient contract in here. If I then come on to Claire.
Thank you, and I apologies for not being Ian today. As you said, it doesn't just happen, and I understand there's been scrutiny, and if they've not raised concerns, then I'm reasonably content with that. I think underpinning the whole thing is that the standards do need to be maintained, and that would be a really important message. But thank you very much.
Graham.
I think it's
Sorry,
refreshing.
Graham. Ian, did you want to come back? Sorry. Ian, did you want to come back in?
Don't think it's necessary. Thanks.
Okay.
It's refreshing to see you here, Claire. Okay. You just said you were sorry for being here, is it?
I'm sorry, not.
Yeah. Yes.
You can be whatever you want, Claire.
Yes. We had a meeting, a Teams meeting on the 15th of March, where we went through all of this with procurement on both contracts, actually. And we were absolutely firm about the fact there's nothing for us to scrutinise other than to look at the figures. It's not a particularly high level contract, and we're really comfortable with everything that was laid out in the paper in front of us. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from members? In which case, if you could put the proposals. We can take them as read. We have all been through them. Thank you. I'll second. All those in favour? Thank you. Great. We then come on to agenda item 11, Public Health and Nursing Services Future Delivery Model. Depending on where we want to go with this, we may need to go into part 2 as part of the discussion. We may not, but we will start in part 1. Again, Ian, I gather you're going to take us through this.
I am, if I may, and I would back up what you just said by suggesting I think we can deal with this in part 1. And in fact, recall the Cabinet's been through this in a slightly different form in the previous meeting, and the basis of the information that is in part 2 was pretty well the same then. So I don't think much has changed. This is about the public health nursing services. Those consist of health visiting from the age 0 to 4, school nursing from age 5 to 19, family nursing partnership, which supports young parents, and it's targeted in particular at young women who are under 19 at the point of conception through to the child's second birthday in this. And what you're being asked to think about and decide on today is the delivery model that we go to, and if you agree the model, we go to procurement for that. And essentially the choices in that are to go to a contract procurement of services or to bring it in-house. Let's get to my place again. In terms of relevance to the Council's business plan, this is all about prevention and early intervention. So you can see how that's part of the bedrock of health improvement to our communities. And the second point in all of this is it provides a huge opportunity to gather health data from right the way across our population. That feeds into the joint strategic needs assessment and hence other work that we do. Currently, we, with the Council, with Bath and North East Somerset, Swindon, Wiltshire Integrated Care Board, are jointly commissioning the HCRG Care Group, which previously, oh golly, the name has gone out of my head. Doesn't matter, it's what it's called now. And they deliver that service. The original contract started in April 2016. It was for a period of 5 years with an option for 2 years on that. We exercised an option in April 21 to take another year, and then in March 22, Cabinet agreed to an additional year in order to enable the wider contract to be negotiated with HCRG and for involvement with our NHS colleagues in all this, because they deliver as their part the specialist services in this. As I said, there's déjà vu in this. In June last year, you were presented with the options for the service beyond April, and that's why you agreed to the extra year. However, and this is the however in this, with the integrated care boards forming up last summer, they're now doing an extensive review of how they deliver their services, and they now find themselves in a position where they're not in, the timing is not right for them to be doing this jointly with us. They did ask us, could we delay further? We've taken legal and contractual advice, and no, we can't. We have to proceed in this to maintain this service. The total values we're talking about here, the contract for WCCHS for 22-23 was 14,122,700, of which 48%, that's £6,741,769 was our part, which comes from our public health grant from government. So that's the scale of what we're talking about in this. So we're now in a position where we have essentially, although there were 3 options last time where we were looking at doing something jointly, we're now left with 2 options, and that is a single procurement or to bring it in-house in that. And the arguments are pretty well the same as last time you saw this, and they're all laid out in the report. There was a great deal of consultation gone into this with all the stakeholders in first developing what were the criteria for this, that we would be evaluating the options. So that again is laid out in the report, and essentially they fall into the strategic objectives in terms of what we want to achieve, and then the technical part of it, which is the HR aspects, the IT aspects, and the funding aspects of this. Those 2 options came out pretty nigh equal on the strategic options in providing the service. However, there was a clear difference in favour of contracting out against those technical considerations, the HR, the funding, and the cost, and the IT aspects, and that. The detail of that is in the part 2, but I don't think any of that has changed since last time you considered that. So I think we're now at the point of making that decision. It's been to overview and scrutiny, to the chairs of the Health Select and Children's Select Committee at the end of April, and I'll leave scrutiny to say whether they had any concerns in that, but I'm not aware of them. And so I think we need to crack on and get your agreement to, and my recommendation is to go for the procurement of these services. And no, I think, sorry, I've come to the end of that. I suggest we proceed.
No problem, thank you. And I'm happy to try and avoid going into part 2 if we don't have to. I mean, the detail on part 2 is around an options appraisal. If we start wanting to discuss anything in terms of the detail around the 2 options, we will need to go in part 2. So if you're going to do that, please let me know so I don't bring you in to talk first. I think the issue about the integrated care board and the fact that we've got some complexity there, and that there is a desire to commission across the entire system, but procurement is out of step. We've got our own risks. I think is one that is going to be possibly a repeating issue in terms of the way integrated care boards across the country work moving forward, and one that we are going to need to find effective solutions to. But the vagaries of procurement make that very difficult from our perspective, and I think also difficult from Swindon's. So, right. Do we have any other comments from Cabinet on this? Claire.
Yes, thank you very much. Just to say that I think the strategic objectives that are listed out on page 258 are absolutely the right ones. Prevention and promotion are absolutely key to the medium and long-term population health improvement. Health promotion for children, adults need to be set in the context of each other, and of course mental health as well. And I think just to stress the importance of the outcome of the procurement exercise is that we're actually talking here, aren't we, about a really excellent culture of integration, information sharing. I don't think I'm straying into part two by saying this, having excellent relationships and underpinning all of that, making ease of access and navigating the system really easy for service users. And I think that's really all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. If you want to come back on that, Ian?
If I may, because you used the word integration, and yes, of course, there's a disappointment in this that we weren't able to proceed in step with the NHS. But don't think that we're going to climb off some separate furrow in this. The whole spirit of cooperation and integration is there, and the importance of sharing the information across is there. And down at the front end of the individual nurse or whatever, having access to that range of services behind is absolutely what we're about achieving here.
I've been involved in a few early discussions with setups of integrated care boards across the country, not just here. And one of the themes that kept being said by people involved was the need to have those good relationships and that mentality of integration, and etc. So that, I think that's more what I meant. And if it came across differently, then my apologies. Thank you.
Not a problem. And I think different boards are at different positions and have different views on the system in place and how it works together. Let's not get into that one now. Sorry, I should have mentioned we'd had questions in relation to this item from Chris Caswell. Chris isn't here. The answers have been put through.
Sorry, obviously John's not here, and nor Johnny Kidney either, but my understanding is absolutely no issues with this whatsoever.
Thank you. And I think it went through a while ago, yeah. Any other comments from members? In which case, I'm happy that we vote on the proposals without going into part two. You've already moved them.
As we said, they're there, set out in the paper. Can I propose that we undertake standalone procurement in this, and that we delegate authority to award contract to Director of Public Health in consultation with Laura, member for Children's Services, Education Skills, and myself in respect to public health.
Ashley, you were seconding that? Great. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Which brings us to the end of the meeting. Thank you all very much, and see you. Oh, sorry, urgent items. There aren't any. So no, I'm not doing agenda items with nothing on them there. No. See you all at the next cabinet meeting or full council, which is first.